Chicago, 2011. A cop is murdered. Police and prosecutors swear they have the trigger man. He swears he didn't do it. How far will each side go to prove they're right?
Like it's just one bombshell after another, where you're like, what?
The story of a PlayStation, a brain-eating amoeba, and the relentless pursuit of justice. Off Duty, out now. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Howdy, howdy, ho, and welcome to Fantasy Fan Fellas. I'm Hayden, producer of the Fantasy Fangirls podcast and your resident lover of all things Sanderson.
And I'm Steven, your bookish internet goofball, but you can call me the Smash Daddy.
And we are currently deep diving Brandon Sanderson's fantasy epic, Mistborn. But here's the catch. Steven here has not read Mistborn before.
That's right, hey. So each week, you'll get my unfiltered, raw reactions to every single chapter.
And along the way, we'll do character deep dives, magic explainers, and Steven will even try to guess what's next. Spoiler alert, he'll be wrong.
Newsflash, I'm never wrong. Episodes come out every Wednesday, and you can find Fantasy Fan Fellas wherever you get your podcasts.
Pepsi Prebiotic Cola in original and cherry vanilla. That Pepsi taste you love, with no artificial sweeteners, only 30 calories, just 5 grams of sugar, and 3 grams of prebiotic fiber. That great Pepsi taste with even more to love. Pepsi Prebiotic Cola. Unbelievably Pepsi.
Hello, and welcome to the Psych Legal Pop podcast. This is a podcast where we talk about popular culture through the lens of an attorney and a therapist. I'm Brooke Brigham, I'm the attorney.
And I'm Tess Brigham, I'm the therapist.
And today we are going to be talking about the case of Steven Staynor. Now, this is the first in a series of episodes that we're going to do over the next few months or so. I don't know when they're going to come out, but of cases that happened in or have some connection to the town where we grew up.
Mm-hmm.
So we grew up in Mendocino County in a town called Ukiah in Northern California. It's about 2 hours north of San Francisco. And my parents moved there when I was like 2. And then Tess was born there. And then I stayed there through high school, graduated from high school. Tess had moved with our mom to Berkeley when she was 10.
Yeah, 10.
Yeah. So it's definitely my hometown. I don't quite think of it that way, but yeah, we did a whole episode. I think it was at Thanksgiving.
It was our Thanksgiving special episode.
Thanksgiving special. We talked all about, where we grew up and how we grew up and our background, and our family and all that kind of stuff. If you're interested in that, but
our father still lives in Ukiah, so we still go up there.
We were just there last weekend.
Yes, and if you're part of our Patreon, you would have found out that we were just there with our dad. And what was I going to say? And we have we grew up with a lot of people there. We have this connection to Ukiah and Mendocino County. So
yeah, we have a lot of friends.
Yeah,
we made when we were there. Most of them don't even live there anymore, but we still are friends with them and have relationships with them because these are our very formative years.
Yes,
and it's a particular kind of place. Like, kind of, there have been some infamous cases,
yes,
that have come out of Ukiah, and part of the reason we were there visiting was to kind of visit some of these places where things happened and get some information from our dad, and do some research.
Yeah.
So before I start, I just want to make a quick announcement that we now have a Patreon.
Yes.
And if you like our content and you want to go to check us out at patreon.com search for Psych Legal Pop podcast, and you can see what we have to offer. We have a weekly bonus episode every week where we just talk about different things. And then we're going to do a special true crime episode once a month for just our Patreon members, and also a episode where you can ask us questions and we'll answer them. It can be legal questions, therapy questions, whatever questions you have of us within reason. don't want to get too personal.
Yeah. If you, the way the Patreon's set up, you can go and you can listen to previews. There's like 5-minute previews of the episodes if you want to get a flavor of what those are like. So yeah, go check it out. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So today we're going to talk about a case that, it has, ties to not just Ukiah, and Mendocino County, but also to Merced.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the case where 7-year-old Steven Staynor was kidnapped in Merced, and he was taken to Mendocino County by a man who then later, 7 years later, kidnapped a boy from Ukiah. So Tess is going to
I'm going to give you a little synopsis.
And then we'll get more into the details and give you some insights into the whole case based upon what we know.
Okay. So Stephen Gregory Staynor was born April 18th, 1965, and was the third of 5 children born to Delbert and Kay Staynor in Merced, California. He had 3 sisters and an older brother, Carrie. So on the afternoon of December 4th, 1972, Staynor was approached on his way home from school by a man by the name of, actually, it wasn't the child molester that took him, was Kenneth Parnell. But the man that approached Stephen was Irvin Edward Murphy, who had become acquainted with Kenneth Parnell. Murphy, described by those who knew him as a trusting, naive, and simple-minded man, had been enlisted by Parnell, who passed himself off to Murphy as an inspiring minister, into helping him abduct a young boy so that Parnell could raise him in a religious type deal, as Murphy later stated. Acting on instructions from Parnell, Murphy passed out religious tracts to boys walking home from school that day, and after spotting Staynor, claimed to be a church representative seeking donations. Staynor later claimed that Murphy asked him if his mother would be willing to donate any items to the church. When the boy replied that she would, Murphy then asked Staynor where he lived and if he would be willing to take Murphy to his home. After Staynor agreed, a white Buick driven by Parnell pulled up, and Staynor willingly climbed into the car with Murphy. Parnell then drove a confused Staynor to his cabin in nearby Cathy's Valley instead. Unbeknownst to Staynor, Parnell's cabin was located only several hundred feet from his maternal grandfather's residence. Parnell molested Staynor during the first night at the cabin. He began raping the boy 13 days later on December 17th. After Staynor told Parnell many times during that first week that he wanted to go home, Parnell told Staynor that he had been granted legal custody of the boy because his parents could not afford so many children and they did not want him anymore. So Parnell began calling the boy Dennis Gregory Parnell, retaining Staynor's real middle name and his real birth date when enrolling him in various schools over the next several years. Parnell passed himself off as Staynor's father, and the two moved frequently around California, living in locations including Santa Rosa and Comptche. Parnell allowed Staynor to begin drinking at a young age and to come and go virtually as he pleased. As he frequently moved from one menial job to another, some of his work required travel and leaving Staynor unguarded. An adult Staynor later remarked that he could have easily used these absences as opportunities to flee, but was unaware of how to summon help. One of the few positive aspects of Staynor's life with Parnell was a dog that he would receive as a gift from him, a Manchester Terrier that he named Queenie. And actually, I do believe that he had Queenie after Stephen was reunited with his parents. He got to keep the dog. As Staynor entered puberty, Parnell began to look for younger children to kidnap. Parnell had used Staynor to attempt to kidnap children on prior occasions, but all the kidnapping attempts were unsuccessful. This caused Parnell to believe Staynor lacked the means to be an accomplice. Staynor revealed later that he had intentionally sabotaged these failed kidnappings. On February 14th, 1980, Parnell and a teenage friend of Staynor's named Randall Sean Poorman kidnapped 5-year-old Timothy White in Ukiah. Motivated in part by the young boy's distress, Staynor decided to return the boy to his parents. So on March 1, 1980, while Parnell was away at his night security job, Staynor left the house with White and hitchhiked in Ukiah. After they were unable to locate White's residence, they went to the police station. By daybreak on March 2nd, Parnell had been arrested on suspicion of abducting both boys. When the police checked into his background, they had previous sodomy conviction from 1951. Both children were reunited with their families that day. Parnell was tried and convicted in 1981 of kidnapping White and Staynor in 2 trials. He was sentenced to 7 years, but was paroled after serving 5. Parnell was not charged with numerous sexual assaults on Staynor and the other boys because most of them occurred outside the jurisdiction of the Merced County prosecutor, or were by then outside the statute of limitations. The Mendocino County prosecutors, acting almost entirely alone, decided not to prosecute Parnell for the sexual assaults that occurred in their jurisdiction. Murphy also got in trouble for helping, and there were other people that were involved in that had abused Staynor over the years. After returning to his family, Staynor had trouble adjusting to a more structured household, as he'd been allowed to smoke, drink, and do as he pleased when he lived with Parnell. In an interview with Newsweek shortly after his escape, Staynor said, "I returned almost a grown man, and yet my parents saw me at first as their 7-year-old. After they stopped trying to teach me the fundamentals all over again, it got better. But why doesn't my dad hug me anymore? Everything has changed. Sometimes I blame myself. I don't know, sometimes if I should have come home at all. Would I have been better off if I didn't?" Staynor underwent brief counseling but never sought additional treatment. He also refused to disclose all of the details of sexual abuse he endured from Parnell. In a 2007 interview, Staynor's sister said that her brother did not seek counseling because their father said Staynor didn't need any. She added he, Steven, got on with his life, but he was pretty messed up. Staynor was bullied by the other children at school for being molested and eventually dropped out. He began to drink frequently and was eventually kicked out of the family home. His relationship with his father would remain strained. In 1985, Staynor married 17-year-old Jody Edmondson, whom he had 2 children, a daughter named Ashley and a son named Stephen Jr. He also worked with child abduction groups, spoke to children about personal safety, and gave interviews about his kidnapping. Staynor joined the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints shortly before his death. At the time of his death, Staynor was living in Merced and working at a pizza shop. On September 16, 1989, Staynor sustained fatal head injuries while on his way home from work when his motorcycle collided with a car in a hit-and-run accident. The driver of the car was later identified by witnesses and was sentenced to 3 months in prison. 500 people attended Staynor's funeral, at which 14-year-old Timothy White was a pallbearer. And then in another case in 2002, Kerry Staynor, who is the older brother of Steven Staynor, was convicted and sentenced to death for the murders of 4 women near Yosemite National Park. And that's a whole other case. And he is now still on death row in San Quentin prison. So those are the broad strokes of what happened. And so, you know, from I don't know what you remember when all of this was happening, but
well, wait, we need to there's a couple missing pieces here.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not sure what year this was, because you talked about them after Steven was kidnapped. You talked about them moving around, but fairly shortly thereafter, they moved up. Well, Parnell moved with Steven up to, they lived in a cabin west of Boonville, which is kind of near Point Arena. It's like the outermost point of Mendocino County. Very, very, very remote.
Yeah.
That's where Steven lived most of his captivity, was in this cabin that had no electricity, no indoor plumbing. And that's where when Parnell kidnapped Timmy White, brought Timmy White to that cabin, and then that's where they escaped from. And we'll talk about their escape. But that's how they got to Mendocino County. So that's
so it seemed like they were going farther north, right? They were in Merced. Where's Comptche?
Comptche is also in Mendocino County. It's
okay.
That's probably technically where they were. It's the town of Comptche, which is in that same area.
Okay. Because Santa Rosa is about an hour north of the Bay Area. And then another hour after that is Ukiah, which is sort of the big city of Mendocino County, even though there's only 15,000 people. And
this is like another hour.
Yeah. So,
Another-
and the other thing too is up there, right? So it's a straight shot up the 101 to get up to Ukiah from the Bay Area. But once you start going out to Boonville or Redwood Valley or Point Arena, Comptche, the roads become 2-lane windy. I mean, some of these roads are along, some are going along, I don't know if it's as far out as, does Point Arena touch the one, or is it farther east? So like the Highway 1 that goes all along, which is a beautiful, beautiful, road to take, but it is incredibly windy. It sort of goes along the coast of California. And so when you get up there, going a mile or two takes much longer than going a highway mile. It's very remote.
Very, very remote. And yeah, again, they were living in this rudimentary cabin. I've seen pictures of it. And Steven was going to school. He was like in junior high. And I don't know how nobody picked up on this, but because they made a documentary a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
My name is Steven. I know.
Well, no. The documentary was in 2022. It was called Captive Audience. That's the one you're talking about, right? Where they interview people that knew him in school.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. There've been a couple documentaries made, but yeah. So they're interviewing these people who are now adults that he went to junior high with. And they even interviewed one of his teachers, and they all talked about how, he lived with his quote unquote uncle.
Mm-hmm.
But no one could go into his house. No one had ever been in the house. And Steven was always like really dirty, had dirty clothes, never wore socks. And like they knew something was off and something was wrong, but nobody contacted Child Protective Services. Nobody contacted the police.
And we were talking about this before. I can understand if you're a kid and you see that and you kind of don't know how to wrap your brain around it, right? As an adult, you can look back and go, oh yeah, that was odd. But it is alarming to hear that a teacher who is a mandated reporter, I don't know what the law was in 1980, but they are mandated reporters, did not do any investigating at all. You have a kid in your class and you're a little bit like, this is off, that you don't, as the adult, go, maybe I'll make some phone calls or maybe I'll investigate a little bit.
I think there were clues that he was food insecure.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's the 70s. This is, what year is this? It was. So
White
was kidnapped
in 1980. So he was taken in 1973.
Yeah. So now here's the thing. This is why, you've heard, we just heard the description of how Steven was kidnapped just off the street walking home. Okay. Well, here's how Timmy White was kidnapped. He was a kindergartner. Okay. He's 5 years old. He was walking from his school to his babysitter's house, which is not very far, a couple of blocks, but he has to cross this really big street, Dora Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
Big.
Oh God, Dora. Yeah.
Yeah. But in Ukiah, that's a big residential street. So he crosses Dora Street, he makes it across, and then he's, almost at his babysitter's house. And literally, Parnell pulls up with that kid. What's his name?
Porman.
And they literally grab him off of the street and put them in the car and drive him up to Comptche or wherever they are. So this is what we lived with.
Yeah.
You wonder why, if you wonder why Gen X parents are always worried about where their kids are and, tracking them on their iPhones and whatever, it's because of this kind of shit.
Yeah. Well, what I was going to say was, I was born in 1973. So first the first news was this boy, Timothy White, disappears. So this 5-year-old, and we too used to walk from our elementary school to our babysitter's house after school too. And it was down the street and some of these other things too. Right. So here is this teeny tiny little town that you're living in. A kid that is around your age is just been kidnapped off the street. And then 2 weeks later, you learn that, oh my God, this kid, that not only was this kid returned, but there was another kid kidnapped and he rescued him. And it was just like, I just remember, being 7 years old and trying to wrap my brain around the fact that someone my age was taken and that was being held
in your town,
in my town. Well, Steven wasn't from Ukiah, but like that the first kid was found somewhere else, that he's my age, that he's been kidnapped, that he's been here this whole time, that all of a sudden this kid, Timothy White, is returned. It was a lot. It was very disturbing, and it was a lot. And I don't remember, you probably have a better memory than I do of like how parents dealt with these kinds of things, because there was so much, it was always like, this was the big, had we gotten into stranger danger stuff yet?
I don't remember.
Or was this the beginning of it?
Well, I don't remember ever being spoken to about stranger danger. I just remember that it was around me all my life. And like, this was the first case that, because I was 11.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the first case that I really remember, but I remember subsequent cases of people my age or around my age being kidnapped and killed. People I went to school with, This happened multiple times during my childhood. And, I think that really, that instills something in you. And I'm a very fearful person. I always assume the worst. Like, I always assume that, like, oh my God, if, I don't hear from somebody or I don't know where they are, like, oh my God, the worst has happened. And I think that has a lot to do with it, because it's not out of the realm of possibility in my mind that the worst can happen.
Yes.
I don't automatically go to, oh, she must just have, her phone died, or she's like, I go to, oh my God, she's been kidnapped.
Yeah.
She's been kidnapped. I mean, this was a huge, had a huge impact on both of our lives. It was, because this is our small little town of like 10,000 people.
And it was what everyone was talking about. Everyone was talking about it. And this is the thing, is at that time, we don't live in the world that we live in today of trigger warnings and and we're terrible. We never give trigger warnings.
Give trigger
warnings because we didn't grow up with it. Like it's not innately there. And this was, I think, a big part of it was that we had, though I felt like our mother was very direct with us about certain things. Like if a man tries to, do certain things or whatever it is, like, no, that is absolutely no. Like I remember her being
she told us to kick and scream and yell and bite and fight.
Or like, no man should be trying to like have, no man should be, she was this graphic. Do you remember this? Like her saying, no man should be putting a penis in your vagina. I mean, I remember this really
direct of it
distinctly in my mind, like so direct, so distinct. So there weren't a lot of conversations. There wasn't a lot of sensitivity. There just wasn't the language for it at the time. So this is, when people laugh about our generation, like this is a big part of it. Like we were really influenced by all of the stuff that we saw that was around us. And being in Ukiah, it's like this very small little community where you don't know, especially when you're young, what's the outside world from this? Like, this is it, this is your everything.
And then to top that all off, a few years later, when you were probably like 7 or 8.
No, I was 7 or 8 in 1980.
Okay, 1980.
What year?
Okay, so a couple years later, when you're like maybe like 9 or 10, and I'm like 13, 14, a girl who lived across the street from our dad was kidnapped and killed.
Yes.
Okay.
That we played with, that we hung out with.
Our mother her mother worked in the same organization where our mother worked.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we hung out a few times, like as families. But when we would go to our dad's house on the weekends or whatever, we'd play with her. We went over to her house. She had a younger brother.
Yeah.
And a few years later, she was kidnapped and murdered.
Yeah.
So this was all around us, and then it was happening in other, like, remember that J.C. Dugard.
Oh yeah.
It was around that same time. And that was like, I think she lived more up near like the Tahoe area. But then, so then you'd start seeing these other cases on television. And then Polly Klaas is another case we're going to talk about because that has a Ukiah connection. But yeah, and then a girl I went to high school with was murdered, like walking home one night in the town of Ukiah. I mean, it was.
Well, because it's a small town. And so at night, if someone's walking home, right, it's very easy to be isolated and alone. And that's why the Kenneth Parnells of the world can hide. Because there's a lot of like in these long, windy roads out in the middle of nowhere, there are people, and there are a lot of, people out there that are, right, like that want that kind of solitude, that like that's the kind of life that they want.
Yeah.
And so there are those kinds of people and they're doing nothing wrong. But there's also people that are like, oh, I do not want to be found. And that's where they are as well. Yeah. So it's interesting. It's like when we think about cities and the high crime in cities, this is a little bit of like how these small towns are. Like there isn't these long stats, but it's like, yeah, this is where weird stuff is happening and people are hiding.
Yeah.
And the other thing was Parnell, when he was working security in downtown Ukiah. And the funny thing was too, when we were driving around with Dad last weekend, from the place where Parnell was working to the police station was what? 2 blocks. I mean, it's that small of a town where the police station is here and Dad's office is like a block, right over here,
Well, here's the story. So I remember I looked this up because several weeks ago I saw this in the Ukiah paper. They're doing this whole retrospective on the Palace Hotel, which is where was working.
Parnell and the Palace Hotel back in the 80s, right, 70s and 80s was like the hotel and the place to go. This is what I remember when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. Like our parents going there after work.
You mean our dad?
Our dad. And then I remember Mom, when our parents were divorced, like being with Dad at a pizza parlor once and hearing about a car being towed, and it was Mom's car. And I remember thinking like, oh, that sounds like Mom's car. Right. And hearing it, because it's that small of a town, like the pizza place is right over. So, but Mom would go there too. And like, that was where all the grownups went for cocktails.
Oh, the Black
and dinner.
Bart. Yeah.
Yeah.
They had a bar called the Black Bart, and that's where all the lawyers went.
Yes.
It was built, like over 100 years ago, but then it was restored in the 70s and 80s. Yeah. So it was like this restored, beautiful old hotel, and it had a restaurant and a bar, and, there was hotel rooms. And so that was 2 blocks from the police station.
Yeah.
Here's what happened that night. So they're doing I love this. They're doing a retrospective on the Palace Hotel because now the place is condemned and they're trying to figure out what to do with it.
Yeah.
They're trying to find an investor to come in and redo it. And this has been going on for 40 years because it closed a long time ago.
Yeah.
It's just been sitting there. It's condemned and they don't know what to do with it. Anyway, so then they somehow tie this to the Timmy White kidnapping. So they interview this guy who was a captain that night working graveyard shift. And this is on the early morning of March 2nd, 1980. And he looks out the front door and he sees 2 kids at the front door, like a younger one and an older one. And he starts to walk towards the door and they take off running. So he radios someone and says, hey, these kids were just standing here, and try to find them. And they found them around the corner, brought them back in. And the older one said, I know my name is Steven. That's where the name of that movie comes from.
Mm-hmm.
And then he said that the younger boy, he said they suspected that it was Timmy White, but he looked very, very different. And so that he was the right age, but they couldn't identify him because Parnell had dyed his hair. Because all the photos on all the missing posters showed this super blonde little kid.
Yeah.
And he had dark hair, so they couldn't tell his hair had been dyed. So, so then they tell the story about how he's grabbed off the street, walking to the babysitter's house, driven to the cabin west of Boonville off of Mountain View Road. Stephen was now being called Dennis. And it took them a while to confirm. This is before computers, okay?
Yeah.
It took them a while to confirm that Stephen, because they're looking at this kid, they're like, well, who are you?
Yeah.
And they literally went into their filing cabinet and looked at, they had like bulletins from other, places in California for missing children. And they're going through and they're like, oh my God, this is Steven Staynor who's missing out of Merced. So he told the police, he brought him here because he didn't want the same thing to happen to Timmy. And so they called, then they talked more about how the night they actually escaped. So Parnell was working at like a late night security shift at the Palace Hotel. Stephen and Timmy walked about a quarter mile down the road until a truck driver stopped and took them all the way to Ukiah. It's a 40-mile drive.
Yeah. I mean, it is no joke. And it's 40 miles, windy roads.
Pitch black.
Because there are no street lights.
No, there's no light.
Pitch black. They're lucky that they weren't hit by a car.
Yeah. And
the other thing too is they're like, if they had walked the whole way, right? Like there was a chance that Parnell would have seen them walking.
Yeah. On the way home.
Yeah. Cause he was like an overnight shift. And I don't know how long it would take two people to walk 40 miles, but it took longer than 8 hours, maybe. Yeah.
They're lucky some other kidnapper didn't pick them up.
Yeah.
So they get into town, and so Timmy couldn't remember how to get to his house, but he remembered how to get to his babysitter's house.
Mm-hmm.
So this person dropped them off at the babysitter's house, but she wasn't home. So they went to a phone booth, and they found the address of the police station. And I started to think, now that we don't have phone booths, like what would have happened?
Yeah.
That's
a good question.
And also, how did they know where the street was? Anyway, they found their way to the...
Again, Dora from where that police station was isn't that far. That's one of the good things about Ukiah. It's not as big.
It's a little bit of a trek. It was, it's more than a mile, like between 1 and 2 miles.
Really?
But, yeah.
Oh, where the babysitter's house was?
That's on it's near Ukiah School.
Oh, way down on Dora, down there. Yeah. Okay, got it. Yeah. Okay, yeah.
So the police captain calls Timmy's parents. It's the middle of the night. He says, can you come down here? So the mother walked in, and I guess Timmy his hair was dyed. He was really dirty. He had these weird, old, unrecognizable clothes. She didn't recognize him.
Mm-hmm.
And she just started crying. She says, "You can't do this to me." And she ran out of the office crying and like sat down in the hallway and said, "You can't do this to me. You can't do this to me." And he said, "Just come back in, just touch him, make contact with him. Like just try, see if you can make contact with him." She goes back in, she touches him, and he says, "Mommy."
Mm.
So they... Yeah. So anyway, they then go 2 blocks up up the street. They surrounded the Palace Hotel, go in, they arrest Parnell. Stephen identifies Parnell, and and everyone's really happy and everything. But here's the thing: is that this is the crazy part. So as you alluded to, okay, so at least back then. This is crazy how the sentencing of these people was back then. So, so the jurisdiction for the prosecution of the kidnapping, it has to occur where the crime happened. So the trial for the kidnapping of Steven Staynor happened in Merced, and he was convicted, but only got 20 months.
Yeah. Yep.
So then in Ukiah, they had a separate trial for the kidnapping of Timmy White. He was convicted, and he got the maximum under the law, which was 7 years.
Mm-hmm. And weren't they weren't consecutive, they were concurrent. And that was another thing with this case, correct? That one of the things that this case changed was that you could make these convictions consecutive.
Well, it's always been that way.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. It's up to the judge if the judge wants to make it consecutive or concurrent. But the point is that today, if you were convicted of kidnapping, it'd be 25 to life.
Yeah, you're done for the fact that man kidnapped 2 young boys and had a conviction on his record
already.
He was already convicted. The fact that he was already convicted and that he kidnapped 2 young boys, left one in captivity, and the fact that and he only gets 7 years and then only serves 5. They let him out 2 years early. You're not even going to make the guy stay the full 7 years.
Again, the sentencing law has changed quite a bit. Now, if it's a violent crime, you have to do minimum 85% of your time. Back then, it was, if you had good behavior, it was 50% of your time.
Mm-hmm.
And also, the DA in Mendocino County, this guy, Joe Allen, who I do remember, he declined to prosecute Parnell for the sex crime because that occurred in Mendocino County. So that was his jurisdiction. And he said that Steven and his mother did not want to go through a second trial when he probably would have only gotten like maybe another 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
But he got a lot of criticism for that. People said you should have made him do it. Like you should have anyway. So
yeah.
Bottom line is he goes to prison for only 5 years and he gets out.
Yes.
And then he does this again.
Yes. Well, but he does it again, but gets caught. I mean, know that's immediately what he goes back to.
But by this time, the laws had significantly changed.
Yeah.
Significantly. And people were tired of seeing, because these sex crimes, even though it was against a child, sex crimes used to be considered like, whatever.
Yeah, rape was a couple years. Like, God forbid you rape someone. And you know what it was? It was because it's women and children.
Right.
I'm sorry. It's women and children. And it's like, they'll figure it out. Psych Legal Pop will be back after these messages. Hello, this is Tess Brigham, one half of the podcast Psych Legal Pop. When I'm not podcasting with my sister and analyzing pop culture, I'm a speaker who talks about mental health in the workplace. In today's post-pandemic hybrid working world, mental health matters more than ever. I specialize in empowering organizations to retain their valuable employees. I understand the unique challenges facing young adults in today's world, and I'm here to bridge the gap. So head over to my website, www.tessbrigham.com, to learn more about my speaking services and how I can help your organization reach new heights of success. Let's revolutionize your organization's approach to mental health and employee retention. Visit www.tessbrigham.com to explore how we can collaborate.
Chicago, 2011. A cop is murdered. Police and prosecutors swear they have the trigger man. He swears he didn't do it. How far will each side go to prove they're right?
Like it's just one bombshell after another, where you're like, what?
The story of a PlayStation, a brain-eating amoeba, and the relentless pursuit of justice. Off Duty, out now. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Howdy, howdy, ho, and welcome to Fantasy Fan Fellas. I'm Hayden, producer of the Fantasy Fangirls podcast and your resident lover of all things Sanderson.
And I'm Steven, your bookish internet goofball, but you can call me the Smash Daddy.
And we are currently deep diving Brandon Sanderson's fantasy epic, Mistborn. But here's the catch. Steven here has not read Mistborn before.
That's right, hey. So each week, you'll get my unfiltered, raw reactions to every single chapter.
And along the way, we'll do character deep dives, magic explainers, and Steven will even try to guess what's next. Spoiler alert, he'll be wrong.
Newsflash, I'm never wrong. Episodes come out every Wednesday, and you can find Fantasy Fan Fellas wherever you get your podcasts.
So finally, people got sick and tired of these, reoffenders, because these guys cannot be rehabilitated.
Yeah.
And it just kept happening and happening. So then when he gets out of prison for that, he moves to Berkeley. So he's living in Berkeley. And in 2004, he's convicted of another sex offense, and he attempted to purchase a child.
Yeah.
For sex.
Mm-hmm.
Like literally purchase a
child.
He paid. So he approached his caregiver and said, "Hey, I'm looking to purchase a child.
He's now too old and too feeble to go out and find kids.
Yeah, he's
on the street.
He's wheelchair bound as a caregiver, and he always would say stuff like, "Well, I want a family. I just want a family."
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so the caregiver contacts the police. The police, they set him. I don't want to say set him up because this is legal. You can do.
Yeah.
It's not entrapment. Entrapment's when you actually put the thought of a crime into the person's head. No, he had the crime in his head. So they had this deal where he was going to pay $100 up front to get a birth certificate for this child he was buying with, and his name was on the birth certificate. And then when he went to pay the other $400 to purchase the child, they arrested him.
Ugh.
And
$500. Jesus Christ.
This time, the 3 strikes law was, in place. He got 25 to life. And he died in prison in 2008 at age 76.
I don't believe in the death penalty, but someone like this, I'd be like, yeah, I'd like to see the guy fry.
Yeah. Let's just withdraw.
He's a piece of shit.
Medical care.
And the other part is, what's important to understand about the story. And one of the things that there's a couple things I wanted to highlight, but one of the things I wanted to highlight is the sentences that we used to give to these kinds of predators. But that, Steven, and it's talked about a little bit, but I wish it was honored more. And I don't know exactly how you do that, of like what kind of hero this kid is.
Yeah.
And the fact that, of all of the shame that he had to live with, this is a big thing. This is a big issue of male sexual assault. We have come a long way, but we have not come as far as we really need to. But at that time, what you really have to understand is 1980. I mean, what was happening to Steven was like, people were calling him the F word, which is the derogatory term for homosexual. F word. I'm not going to repeat it because it's a terrible word, but that's what they were calling him.
Yeah,
like he was being
they're making fun of him.
They're making fun of him. And, and the fact that he never got help. I mean, this was really, and I remember in that documentary with the mother, because the father passed away and the mother was interviewed. And the mother, I feel for her because this woman's been through a lot. I really do.
With more than one child.
With more than one child. But at the same time, I do feel like, and apparently she didn't feel like she could go against the father, but it was the father, Delbert, who really put his foot down and was like, he doesn't need this. And I don't really have anything to back it up, but it sounds like based on everything I've read and what I saw in the documentary is it's almost like the father didn't know how to deal with
it was too shameful.
It was too shameful for him. This concept, especially for men and homosexuality and what does it mean? And, Steven went through so much and none of it was ever dealt with. It was almost like what he said. That's why I wanted to read those quotes. It was like, okay. And okay, let's keep going. And that's a big part about how we dealt with things back at that time, right? Like, okay, there you go. Keep moving on.
Just be happy that you're rescued.
home. You're rescued. You're here. So just keep going. And I do wonder if, I wonder what it would be like for him if this had happened in today's world, if things would be different, because here's this kid, this horrible thing happens, and then he dies tragically at age 24.
27?
No, 24. He's 24. And the other thing is the movie that came out. So this is the other thing with Ukiah. Like all of this was this was all 1980. All of this happened. And then in 1989, by then I'm in Berkeley, I remember when this TV movie, and this was before, cable and all of these streaming stations like NBC. It was like a 2-night thing or 2 weeks in a row, which is a big deal. There was a TV movie called I Know My Name is Steven. And that TV movie came out in 1989, same year that Steven dies. And that's the thing about it is he has had such a tragic life. He continued to abuse drugs and alcohol, I believe. he seemed to be a, happy, married and a good dad.
He had 2 kids.
He had 2 kids.
Spoke very well of him.
Yeah.
In the documentary. What was the documentary called a couple years ago?
Captive Audience.
Captive Audience. That's if you're interested,
it's excellent.
In this case, it's really good. And they interview his children, who are very kind and really understand, like, have obviously really gotten therapy. I don't know what, taken the time to understand what their father must have gone through.
Yeah. And it's just, it's sad and it's tragic. And it's also just, I guess I wonder, and this is my question, and there's no real answer for it, of, did this happen? Was Steven never meant to live here for a long time? Like, the pain was too great. And so maybe he needed to go and start a new life, or do you know what I mean? Like, maybe it was the best thing for him was to drift off, or maybe he
know about that.
or maybe he did reckless things because he was suicidal in many ways.
Yes.
And I don't know. I mean, listen, I don't know. Like, it depends on what you believe in this world, and if you believe in higher powers and other things and other forces. But I do think that the tragedies that he had as a child were directly in connection to the fact that he died young. Because I think he was probably a pretty reckless person.
Well, okay. But I mean, I don't think he was like drunk or high. I think
no. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah. A car hit him. I think that was just, it just happened. Like, he was hit. He was hit by a car and killed. I don't think it had anything to do with some grand plan for his life, because I would hope that, like, if he had lived longer, he was still only 24. And, if he had lived longer, maybe he could have gotten some help. I don't know. But, do you know that Timmy White died at age 35?
What? I didn't know that. Oh my gosh. Well, and also the fact that Timmy White was a pallbearer on his, just the impact Timmy had on, the relationship that Steven and Timmy had. And I want to talk about the Timmy White thing, but I just feel like, Steven's really a hero at 14 years old to do what he did. And I think that I also wanted to highlight some of the other people that were in Parnell's orbit, because it's very easy to think, like, well, why didn't he just leave? Like,
didn't he have a wife? Didn't Parnell have
there was a
wife during some of that time?
Yes.
She cooperated with the prosecution.
Yes.
They did not prosecute her.
Her name was Barbara Mathis, I believe.
Yeah.
I took that part out, but basically she lived there for about a year and a half. And apparently she was part of the abuse as well.
Oh God.
I just didn't include that part, but the fact that this kid, he really risked everything for Timmy.
He did.
He really did. And I think that Steven really probably thought, this is my fate, this is my life, and this is how it's going to be. And the fact that just hearing the stories of how he was preventing Parnell from kidnapping other children,
right?
And
it took foil these attempts.
Yeah, and the fact that in this, which is not talked about, and the fact that it took Parnell to like rope in somebody else. Like, Parnell was smooth. He really was. These people, they are smooth. And he found people that he could con easily to get them in and create these stories so that people would fall for them. So anyway, I just wanted to highlight that. So Timmy died?
So he died in 2010 at the age of 35 from a pulmonary embolism.
Gosh.
And he had a wife and 2 kids.
Wow.
Now, another component of this, which I didn't really have time to research this whole thing, but is the fact that Steven Staynor's brother went on to become a serial killer.
Yes.
And what is this? Okay. I mean, the tragedy of
of this family. Yeah.
So I can't remember. Okay. I know I've seen documentaries on this too, and there are different theories about, okay, is a serial killer born or are they made? What happened to Steven, and the fact that all of the attention was going to Steven, and in that movie, that made for TV movie, I remember like they would show when Steven came home and everyone was so happy and they had all these celebrations or whatever, and Carrie felt kind of pushed out. They're implying that somehow this made him a serial killer.
Hold on. Are you talking about I Know My Name is Steven or Captive Audience? Because that's different. Because I Know My Name is Steven. I Know My Name is Steven, the TV movie that depicted the story. That came out in 1989.
That was a long time ago. Okay.
Carrie Staynor committed those murders in 1999. So you're talking, I think you're thinking of Captive Audience, because that's what the documentary, because that's what Captive Audience was trying to sort of make this leap or imply. Yeah. Which we don't know. Who knows?
Yeah. Cause I can't remember if, Carrie had a troubled background or if it only started later in life. I wish I meant to, look more into it. I can't remember.
I mean, it's hard to know, right? So basically, he murdered 3 people in Yosemite Park. 4 people in Yosemite in 1999, and he was working there. As a caretaker, maintenance. Yeah. I think, and that's the part. This is the part that I really don't know. I don't study serial killers, so I don't know exactly why, what the underlying issues are. But I do think that the way the documentary implied that Carrie was a little odd, a little odd from the get-go, that he was a little odd, that obviously having your brother kidnapped and then gone and then returned, and then all of a sudden your brother's getting all this attention. And then he dies tragically. Yes, he's the oldest. He's the oldest brother. And I also wonder about this dad, Delbert, who this is, again, I don't know anything about him, but this is my just thoughts is I don't get the sense that Delbert talks about feelings that much. I don't think, I think that in this family, I think that like Steven disappears. I think nothing's ever dealt with or talked about or done it all. And I think it's just like we shut it all down and we just deal. And then all of a sudden he's back. And so, but we shut it all down and we deal. And then, okay, let's not talk about the awful things that happened. And do you know what I mean? I think it was just, I also wonder too, if Carrie was someone who maybe would always be a little quirky, but would never, kind of an oddball, but like nothing really would ever happen if the events of his life and everything that he was a part of and was never able to really deal with. Because nobody in that family got to deal with anything. Steven on down. Nobody. The mom didn't seem to be able to get to deal with anything. Nobody. But the kids had the hardest time because they were kids. They had kid-like brains. And this Delbert was just telling everybody, like, shut up, keep your head down and keep going. No therapy for you.
Yeah.
So that's what I wonder with Carrie. If that was enough for him to do it, because yes, he's a serial killer because he killed more than 3 people, but he wasn't out like murdering several people a year for years and years and years. This was like one incident that all happened in one short time span, right?
Yeah, it was. But I mean, if he hadn't gotten caught,
I mean, who knows? Maybe he killed other people. Maybe we don't know. Maybe he really truly is a true serial killer and he's been doing this for years. I don't know.
I think it probably, maybe we should do a follow-up episode on this, because I really think that, what happened to his family, what his parents were going through, the fact that he probably was not getting his needs met.
Yeah.
I'm sure that had a lot to do with it.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And
I think that's the other thing about a lot of these people, right? It feels like, how do you make a serial killer? And I think so much of it is a perfect storm, right? How do people become who they are? And I do think that some of it is a perfect storm of situations, but you can look at it the same way with Steven, right? Like, what, you would think maybe someone like Steven, after everything that he's been through, if a new boy shows up,
he just like goes along with the
program, or, becomes a perpetrator himself, starts to act out on his own, or maybe he grows up and starts acting out outside of that. And he didn't. So who knows? Like 2 people in the same family, both tragic circumstances, very different people, very different reactions.
Yeah, we should definitely do a follow-up and look more into that, because his crimes were pretty, I mean, he raped and killed these people. One of the women that he killed, like a naturalist at in Yosemite, like beheaded her. I mean,
God.
it was like really, really violent.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes from like a real
That comes from somewhere.
deep place.
Well, and that's that whole nature versus nurture. I mean, you know this having a child, and Mom always said this to us. I heard this throughout my childhood, which was, you know, she always says, like, the two of you are very much who you were when you were born, like your personalities and how you are. And I see this with my own child of like, yeah, he's pretty much who he was since the day he was born. Like, and you know, so that's that question, right? Of, was Cary Staynor going to be this regardless? Or I don't know, maybe he would have been no matter what, because this is who he was no matter what. It just so happened that this happened to his brother.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Very
But it's
tragic.
It's very, very tragic. And, you know, if you're not from up here and you don't, you know, just imagine the long, dark, windy roads. And that's what Steven at 14 years old took this little 5-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a hero.
Yeah, I
Very
remember
much so.
when it happened, you know, of course it's like on the front page of the newspaper for days. But there was this one, like, as soon as they got the first picture, you know, of the two of them, after they returned, it was this huge front page picture. And I remember asking Mom if I could have the paper.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I wanted to keep the newspaper.
What'd she say?
Yeah, she gave it to me. But I don't remember what I did with it. At some point, I probably got rid of it. But yeah, it was the same thing. Yeah, I mean, and I was only like 11. Like, I'm looking at this 14-year-old hero. You know, and I'm not thinking, this is before I even know about any of the allegations.
Yeah.
Molestation or anything.
Yeah.
I was thinking, and he was very good looking. You know, this very attractive, like 14-year-old hero on the front. And I'm just, yeah, it was totally like, oh my God, you know, like, it was like amazing.
Wow. So, yes.
So, yeah, so we went by all of the, we didn't go all the way out to Comptche or
Point Arena. That would have taken us forever.
I
don't think Dad would have agreed to that.
No. Also, we don't even know where this cabin is.
Yeah.
If it even exists anymore. Like, we don't know. But yeah, we went by the police station, which isn't even the police station anymore. It's now just an abandoned building. There's so many abandoned buildings there. Like, I'm like, wasn't the DMV over here? And he's like, oh yeah, it's not there anymore. Now they have a big new building, but the old one is just sitting there. This is abandoned buildings, and the Palace Hotel is condemned. I mean, all these places are just like,
yeah, they got to revitalize. What are they trying to revitalize downtown Ukiah? And Dad's got because they're trying to build all of these, like, I don't know if they're trying to build parklets out there, or are they trying to do more greenery? But Dad's pissed because they've effed up the streets, according to him.
What it is? It's like where they extend the corners out, and this has to do with ADA compliance. You know, you have to make the corners wider so wheelchairs can go on and off the sidewalks.
Okay, then Dad shouldn't be complaining.
Yellow strips, like, so if blind people know they're about to walk into traffic, like, if it's to make it all ADA compliant, and he's just pissed off because it does take up quite a bit of the road.
Yeah. But it's just typical, but it's sort of typical Ukiah. Like, it's taken you this long to do this?
Yeah.
Like, what?
Didn't we pass this law like in the 70s or the 80s?
And they're just now catching up to like, oh, maybe we should make these streets better.
Yeah.
Anyhow,
well, quite a place. So, so we have a couple other Mendocino County spotlights.
Yes. It's part of our Mendocino County murder kidnappings.
Including the creme de la creme, which is the People's Temple.
Jim Jones, yes.
That one's that's a
good
lot.
One, though.
That's a lot of information.
And our father has met Jim Jones more than once.
Yeah, he kind of didn't work for him, but he was on the board of legal aid who hired my dad.
Yeah. So lots to talk about there. All right, let's wrap it up.
Good times. Okay, so again, please visit our Patreon page if you're interested, or just subscribe to the podcast. That's helpful. Leaving a 5-star rating is helpful. You can find us on social media at Psych Legal Pop on TikTok and Instagram. That's it. We'll see you next time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See you next time.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
This message comes from Jackson. Taxes aren't something you can only think about once a year. With investments, planning for tax day is year-round. Fortunately, Jackson offers tax-efficient products. Visit jackson.com for more information on how our products can make your tax bill a little bit less painful. Jackson is short for Jackson Financial Incorporated, Jackson National Life Insurance Company, Lansing, Michigan, and Jackson National Life Insurance Company of New York, Purchase, New York.
Howdy, howdy, ho, and welcome to Fantasy Fan Fellas. I'm Hayden, producer of the Fantasy Fangirls podcast and your resident lover of all things Sanderson.
And I'm Steven, your bookish internet goofball, but you can call me the Smash Daddy.
And we are currently deep diving Brandon Sanderson's fantasy epic, Mistborn. But here's the catch. Steven here has not read Mistborn before.
That's right, hey. So each week, you'll get my unfiltered, raw reactions to every single chapter.
And along the way, we'll do character deep dives, magic explainers, and Steven will even try to guess what's next. Spoiler alert, he'll be wrong.
Newsflash, I'm never wrong. Episodes come out every Wednesday, and you can find Fantasy Fan Fellas wherever you get your podcasts.
Pepsi Prebiotic Cola in original and cherry vanilla. That Pepsi taste you love, with no artificial sweeteners, only 30 calories, just 5 grams of sugar, and 3 grams of prebiotic fiber. That great Pepsi taste with even more to love. Pepsi Prebiotic Cola. Unbelievably Pepsi.